Cabernet tends to be the sort of Errol Flynn of the grape varieties.
One of Australia's leading beer judges.
People always ask, how do you get involved in sake and how does that connect to music?
Because wine is an adventure.
Conventional winemakers who just condemn all natural wine as faulty.
The prestigious title of Sake Samurai.
Looking at whiskey in more of an artful culinary way.
The difference between getting good quality fresh hops, it just translates straight through into the beer.
This is the Drinks Adventures podcast. I'm James Atkinson, and this is the show where I speak to some of the world's most exciting producers of beer, wine and spirits and uncover trends and issues in the drinks industry today. Welcome to Season 6 of the Drinks Adventures podcast, and we return with the story of one of Tasmania's leading single malt whisky distilleries that has recently returned to family ownership. You may have read on the Drinks Adventures website or in the newsletter my interview with Jeff Bainbridge, the CEO of Lark Distilling Company, formerly Australian Whisky Holdings, in which he explained the company's reasons for selling the Overeem Whisky brand back to founder Casey Overeem's daughter, Jane Sawford, formerly Jane Overeem, and her husband Mark Sawford. That sale of the Overeem brand and inventory has now settled, which I think is exciting news for all concerned. And I thought, what better way to start this season of the podcast than to catch up with Jane for a chat about this development and what the future holds for the Overeem Whisky brand. And that's coming up right after this. Now, I'm no brewer or distiller, but I have a fair few friends in the industry who are, and I know where they go to source the ingredients they need to make the wonderful beers and spirits that we all enjoy drinking. I'm talking, of course, about Bintani. With experts in all categories on the team, Bintani understands how brewing and distilling ingredients work together like no other supplier. Bintani handpicks the best. Jane Overeem, congratulations firstly on what is some pretty exciting news that Overeem Single Malt Whisky is now back in family hands.
Thank you very much. Yep, we are so over the moon.
Maybe you could explain how it was that your father Casey came to sell the business in the first place.
Sure. So it was around 2013 when he was approached to sell Overeem. He wasn't quite ready to do it at the time when he was approached, but the business had really grown quite quickly, and it was still a bit of a two-man team, Dad and myself, and we knew it was at that stage where we needed to scale up, one in production and two in staff. And Dad wasn't really ready at that time to go full throttle and do that next stage, and nor was I, to be honest. So I wasn't ready to take over the distillery. Dad wasn't ready to turn it into a big business. So that was, I guess, the end decision for him to say, yep, it is the right time to sell.
And in the interim, you and your husband Mark set up a distilling business of your own.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll go a little step before that. So when Dad actually sold, that was to some local Tasmanian investors that also purchased Lark Distillery. And Lark and Overeem then merged under the one company umbrella. And I actually started working, I sort of came with the sale, I guess, of Overeem. I started working at that new company and still managing Overeem Distillery for a good 3 years. I actually was doing a fair bit of work for Lark as well. So I launched 40 Spotted Gin at the time as well. So I think that's it was a great learning experience for me, but I wasn't as interested in gin as I was Overeem Whisky. So that was part of the reason why I thought my career is changing, and that's when I thought it's time to go back out and focus on family business again and starting a distillery from scratch was the plan.
Now, I did see that you launched Sawford Distillery, but I didn't really know much about what that distillery was all about. Is that going to continue on under the Sawford brand?
No, so now we've changed the name to Overeem Distillery. That was never the plan to purchase Overeem Distillery. This was only 7 months ago. So Mark and I, we registered Sawford Distillery, in which we worked hard producing single malt whisky, a recipe very similar to Overeem, I guess you could say. And then 2.5 years into production at Sawford Distillery is when we were approached to buy Overeem. So we've changed the Sawford Distillery company name now to Overeem Distillery.
And does that sort of mean that having brought the Overeem brand back under your control, that you've already got these existing stocks of whisky that you can basically release as Overeem Whiskies.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. So all of that stock was due to be released middle of 2022. We're still a little undecided as to whether we will release something different to Overeem, I guess under the Sawford brand. We'll wait and see. That's something we need to give a bit more thought.
What were the circumstances under which you were approached? I did actually interview Jeff Bainbridge from Australian Whisky Holdings, which is now, of course, Lark Distilling Company, and sort of heard his side of the story of why they decided that maybe Overeem would be best in family hands. But what were the circumstances from your perspective?
Oh, look, we were just really pleased that they'd made that decision, that it was better to go back to the family so that they could really focus on Lark. And for us, when they approached us, we just, I could say it's a no-brainer. We were so excited. We just thought, this is definitely the way we want to go. We had no hesitations when we were approached. And, we just went for it. We had, very easy sort of heads of agreement in order back in December. And then from, January to now, we just we're working out logistics and they were excellent to deal with, Australian Whisky Holdings. I must say it was very easy and, the whole settlement process was very straightforward.
What are your plans for the brand?
For Overeem, we've got lots of plans, and that's what Mark and I have been working on for the last 6 months, sort of reviewing where we want to take Overeem into the future. I guess the initial plans that we have for Overeem right now is to just get to know our customers again. It's been, 6 years since I was selling Overeem, so I really just want to get to know who our customers are, where it's selling, who it's selling to, and really maintain or sustain these relationships once again. So that's the initial plans. Long-term plans, we'd love to, once we've sorted out, we're comfortable with where it's at in Australia, we do really want to look international and where we can start placing Overeem and build relationships overseas.
For people who don't sort of know the full background to Overeem, what was your dad, Casey's, background and, how did he get into distilling?
So Dad had various businesses prior to starting the distillery. He was actually a fitter and turner by trade. He'd done shopping centre management. He was a property developer. Gosh, he had a caravan park in Queensland at one stage. He'd done all sorts of things. And he'd actually retired at 49 years of age. And that's when he decided he needed a hobby, I guess, to occupy his time in retirement. Dad's not good at being retired. And he'd actually travelled to Scotland a number of years before. Actually, in the late 1980s, he was in a relative's house in Norway, and one of his cousins had been just playing around with a little still under their house. And that's sort of when Dad's interest really sparked. He's always loved whiskey and he's always been interested in distilling. He's read a lot of books over the years. He actually went to Scotland and visited all the distilleries with Bill Lark. And he and Bill Lark actually experimented with their first still in the late 1980s. And then Bill went on to then really make a career out of it, had the law changed in Tasmania so that you could have small distillery production. And it wasn't until Dad had retired that he actually thought, I might give this a go as a bit of a hobby. But as you can see, it turned into more than just a hobby, and I'm grateful for that.
Whiskey has been a part of your life from a pretty young age?
Yeah. When I was 18, actually, was the first time I got exposed to whiskey, I guess. I went on a trip with Dad to South Australia. We went to the Malt Whisky Convention in Adelaide, and, I had my first whiskey morning tea where we sat down to 4 or 5 different whiskies to taste. So that was my first experience of really understanding how to nose and taste, and I think that was the start of it. And, the rest is history.
There would have been plenty of 18-year-olds that might have been turned off and might not have been sucked in by that experience. Yeah.
No, I'm glad I got to sit down with quality whiskey because it's interesting, isn't it? A lot of 18-year-olds would taste bad whiskey, I think, is normally whiskies that aren't as palatable, whereas I sort of learned from that age that when you taste the good ones that you can really accept them and learn to love them.
What is the Overeem whisky style? Is there any particular aspects of it that separate it from other Tassie distilleries?
Look, I think what we love about Overeem is it's very consistent in its quality. We're maturing in majority 100-litre French oak casks, port, sherry and bourbon, and we're actually putting a lot of 200-litre casks down now too. But look, the Overeem style, it's very refined and delicate, and I think that really comes from the barrels we're using. We're toasting and charring them, and we're leaving them to rest, 5 years plus. So we're getting a really nice, delicate, refined spirit where the wood isn't taking over in that maturation time. So ex-port, ex-bourbon, ex-sherry, we release them all as 43% standard strength and also at 60% cask strength.
And tell me about the barrel sourcing. They're called ex-port and ex-sherry. Are they, in fact, Australian ex-fortified wine casks?
Yes, that's right, they are, yeah. So our cooperage, SA Cooperage, that they're actually have changed their name to Australian Coopers now, and they also have Tasmanian Casco under the cooperage banner, and they are selecting from local wineries, Penfolds, McWilliams and Seppeltsfield. And we're also importing our bourbon barrels.
This episode of Drinks Adventures is supported by Fever Tree Premium Mixers, the mixer of choice in the world's best bars and restaurants. Right now, I'm enjoying Fever Tree's smoky ginger ale as the perfect accompaniment to some of my favourite bourbons and whiskies. One of the details that I've seen you announce is that you've put the price down slightly on the core range of single malts. Tell me about that decision.
We thought about it for a long time. We really listed all the pros and cons, and we really wanted to better reflect the original vision and intention that Casey had when he started Overeem. And look, price point was just one of the aspects, and that was what we've recently communicated to our customers. We always have wanted Overeem to be drunk regularly and more often and shared often among friends and family, and just lowering that price point to sort of help that happen a little bit was really where the decision was made.
And so it's 195 recommended retail when it would have been, was it around 220 or something like that?
230. It was 230. Yeah.
I guess in the last few years since you and I probably last spoke, the Australian whisky segment has evolved incredibly quickly, with the likes of Starwood and Archie Rose and these quite big by Australian whisky standards and well-resourced businesses that are able to bring whisky to market at a much more affordable price point. Is that a direction that you think that Overeem will have to move in over time?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we'll be able to go that far, depending on the amount of stock we lay down. But I think the amount of stock that we've got down at the moment really reflects the price point and what we need for our business and what we can pass on then to the customer. So I think where the price is at right now is a very fair price. It's sustainable for our distillery, and hopefully it's sustainable for customers to purchase that product at that price. We're also, aging for 5+ years. It's all single cask releases for Overeem, and we're going to be continuing with the 700ml bottle.
Is there any plan to release vatted malts at any stage in the future, or will you stick to single cask?
Yeah, so that was the other reason behind potentially having a second brand, whether that's a standalone brand that's more around Sawford or another product, I guess, under the Overeem brand in 2022 when the old Sawford Distillery stock comes on board. I hope I'm not confusing you here. Our actual intention for that brand was to change things up a little bit. So although our production processes were very similar to Overeem, it was actually in the finishing that we were going to be doing a bit more experimenting, marrying casks, finishes, like you say. And we still may do that. So that's definitely something we're going to give a lot more thought to. And as we taste those casks over the next couple of years, we will be able to determine what it is that we want to do with that.
Can you tell me anything about what sort of different kind of casks you're working with there?
Yeah, sure. So we've put some PX casks down, some musket casks. So these are casks that you haven't seen for Overeem before. So whether they are released as single casks or we marry them together or we choose some to finish in other casks, that's all still undetermined. But it is exciting because whether it's under a separate brand or under the Overeem brand, I just can't wait to release them regardless. But we do have some very exciting stock to release next year for Overeem, and that is the Overeem 12-year-old bourbon.
12-year-old bourbon cask.
Yeah. So that'll be next year, which I'm very much looking forward to.
Will that be your first age statement product or?
Yeah, all the barrels that Dad made 12 years ago, which is so great that it's now come back to us and we're able to release them.
What are your thoughts on how the Australian whisky industry is evolving at the moment? And you know, there's obviously a lot of new entrants.
Yeah, there's so many now, I can't keep up. In Tasmania, we were the 4th distillery. Overeem was the 4th distillery, and I think there's now 50 plus. I don't actually know all of the distilleries yet. I haven't been to visit even half of them, so let alone the rest in Australia. I need to increase my knowledge on what's out there, I think.
Now, I've actually visited the Overeem Distillery quite a while ago now, at which stage the still was on the family property.
I remember you coming to visit.
Yeah. Where is the distillery now?
So we're not too far from where it began. We're about 5 minutes away in Huntingfield. So we built some warehouses here, which are, excellent. We've got a lot more space than you would probably remember. It was quite small. That was purpose-built for literally just the stills and a little desk and a little bathroom, whereas now we've got a lot more storage space. We've got a lot more room to move, which is great. Office upstairs, and we've got 4 bond stores attached to the distilling warehouse.
Does the distillery have a cellar door that people can visit?
Yeah, we've set up a little cellar door here. We'd love to start seeing visitors. We will start promoting that down the track in the near future once we're completely ready. Look, it is a warehouse, but we've definitely prettied it up, and we've got all the stock available for sale here, and we've got a really nice tasting table set up, and we will do some things here, yeah.
Where is Overeem currently distributed? Where can people find your products?
We are going to be doing all of the distribution ourselves, and obviously we've only just taken that over literally last week. But I do believe, there's a number of independent bottle shops around the country that are stocking Overeem. I think Dan Murphy's have a limited amount. You know, we're still working on where it's all going, and that you can buy it online, of course, with us at overeemwhisky.com. If anyone isn't on there yet, just jump on our website. We've got back the old Malt Vault Club, which was something I launched years ago. So that's the name of the club, but that's the mailing list. And we hope to do some nice special events around the country once COVID isn't affecting us all as much.
How have the last few months been for you? Obviously, you've been pretty focused on getting this deal across the line, but how have the last few months been as a result of COVID?
Yeah, look, I mean, we've been very lucky. We've got, it's normally just Mark, myself and our distiller here at the distillery. So the big difference for us was that our children were home. We've got 2 small children, a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So having them home, it was lovely time actually to have them home. And Mark and I just sort of tag teamed. One of us was at home and one of us was at the distillery. So look, we weren't really impacted from a distillery side of things, but we also own some venues down on Kingston Beach. We've got a restaurant and a bar, Robbie Brown's. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, and they were definitely impacted, so we were closed for quite some time down there, and it was a very quiet time, but we used that time to renovate the restaurant, which was good. But it's now open again, and customers are back in, which is really, really nice to see. So no, look, it hasn't all been bad, and we're doing just fine.
Good to hear. Well, look, Jane, I'll let you go. Thanks so much for the chat about this really exciting news for Overeem, and I know I'm really pleased for you and can't wait to see some of these exciting new whiskies becoming available.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
The Drinks Adventures podcast is produced by me, James Atkinson, with additional production and mixing by Dave Robertson. You can find complete transcripts, links and other information on the show at drinksadventures.com.au. You can follow me on all social media platforms at @ByJamesAtkinson Like my Facebook page, James Atkinson Drinks Adventures, to be kept informed of podcast giveaways and other news about the show. The Drinks Adventures podcast needs your support as listeners. Please do us a favour and leave an honest review and rating for the podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. We love hearing your feedback and it helps inform other people this is a show worth listening to. Or simply drop us a line at hello@drinksadventures.com.au.